Welcome to In the Studio on Davis Media Access. I'm Tim Gaffaney. Illuminate, educate, and connect. Since 2002, that's been the mission of the Robert and Marguerite Mondavi Center for the Performing Arts in Davis. The center recently debuted its 20th anniversary season, which includes another exciting calendar of music, theater, dance, storytelling, and individual speakers. To tell us more about the Mondavi Center, we have Jeremy Ganter, the center's Associate Executive Director and Director of Programming. He has been with the Mondavi for over 20 years, since even before the center's opening night. He has a BA in Music History from SUNY Albany and is a PhD candidate in History at UC Davis. Welcome, Jeremy, and congratulations on the 20th anniversary season.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about 20 years so far. It's great to be here.
That's great. Absolutely. Well, let's start off by talking about how we did get here. How has this world class venue thrived in a city of just 70,000 people?
The thing about the Mondavi Center that is one of the things that is so special is that it really got off on the right foot. So, Larry Vanderhoof, who was chancellor of UC Davis when the Mondavi Center was imagined by him and built in the mid 90s, well before the Mondavi Center opened, he said very publicly, taking what he called at the time the biggest risk in his entire career. He said very publicly, UC Davis needs to have this world-class performing arts center, and I will have it. And kind of he staked part of his chancellorship on this dream. And really, from that beginning place, we've had incredible support from the university, from the Davis community. But then, as we've grown and as we've evolved, that's really grown to include the entire Sacramento region and even parts of the Bay Area. So our audience has grown. Our audience has embraced what we're trying to do artistically, and so it was kind of the right time and the right place and the right people to get this place up, and then to keep it going.
That's great. So, across the landscape of world class performance venues in the country, I mean, how common is it for a performing arts space like this to be located at a major university? And further to what you just said yourself, what opportunities or challenges does it present for serving the needs of these potentially diverse constituencies, the community at large, the region, the university community?
Yeah, so one thing that I actually did not realize until I'd been doing this for a while doing this job at the Mondavi Center is the idea of performing arts centers based on universities, particularly Research One universities, is a very American phenomenon. And I didn't fully understand that until many years ago, I went to a festival conference in Australia, and they were just amazed at this number of touring opportunities to university presenting organizations and performing arts venues. So in the United States and in California in particular, because of the UC system and the California State University system, university-based performing arts centers are quite common. We're a big part of the touring ecology in the West. So there's a tour route, I'm generalizing here, but there's a tour route that goes roughly from Arizona, Phoenix, Tucson area to San Diego, and then straight up the West Coast, often ending in Seattle or Vancouver across the border. And a lot of that touring ecology is built on UC and CSU venues. So we're very proud of what we do for touring in the West. And there are also, of course, a lot of non-university based venues that are also part of that ecology. I think to answer the second part of your question, kind of what are the challenges and opportunities? I think the biggest opportunity for being a performing arts center at a university is the deep bench we have for context, for intellectual activity, for using our performances, for engaging with students, for the academy, all of the things you can do when you have this big university community behind you. And then similarly, we are part of the land grant mission of UC Davis, as are a lot of UC presenters. where it's part of our job to reach out from the campus and engage with the community. And I think one of the challenges that we've had over the years, I think we've done a good job to break down some of these, what I would call misperceptions. But there's the challenge around getting people to understand that just because this is a beautiful building with a name of very wealthy people on it at a big, well-funded university, that we're not actually an elitist institution, that we're welcoming. There's something for people here. And I think it's very understandable that people don't necessarily see that right away until they've come to the center. I think it's our job to really convince people to cross that threshold with us and find out that they actually do belong here. And that's a big part of the mission that you mentioned at the beginning is trying to create the sense of belonging for everybody in the arts.
Well, and speaking about what is actually here, then, as the director of programming, can you tell us what goes into designing a season's calendar? And as part of that, I'd love to hear, what's sort of the recipe for the best mix of different types of events like music, dance, theater, and even further, what's the recipe for the best mix of music that you present?
Sure. Sure. So, I mean, the caveat I'll give you right up front is that, everything about our business has been disrupted by the pandemic. So we're thinking very differently about how many performances we do, how we sell them, all of that. Audience behavior has changed a lot due to the pandemic, very understandably. But in broad strokes, at any one moment, the programming team. So I'm the director of programming, but our executive director, Don Roth, is involved. We've got a programming staff that work very closely with me and with Don on each season. At any one time, we're working on 3 seasons at a time. So using this season as example, we're still working on the 22-23 existing season, adding things, changing things, of course, producing the actual performances when the artists get here. The main work of the programming team right now, and this is always the case, is next year. So we're starting to build the 23-24 season. And then we're also doing a little bit of work way out in 24-25, and that's mostly classical music. As far as how we work in the genres that we work in, you do to some extent when you're a multidisciplinary presenter like the Mondavi Center. So we work in 7 or 8 different genres. If you look at subgenres too, you do have to sort of pick your battles of where you want to develop an audience, what your audience wants to actually come see, and then try to find a way to connect those 2 concepts to develop an audience for a certain genre. And I'd say 2 of the places where we've been super successful in that are jazz and modern dance. And part of that is we've just put a lot of energy into bringing both up and coming jazz artists and up and coming dance companies, but also really well established ones. So as people start to come again and again, they start to see this arc between early career artists getting introduced to somebody new and the opportunity to see, the Alvin Ailey's of the world or the Jazz at Lincoln Center orchestras of the world who are well established. And there are other areas where we've chosen to do that work. Classical music is another one. The Mondavi Center, the presenting program within the Mondavi Center was originally fundamentally a classical music organization. So that was the original core of our audience. So we've continued to serve that audience as well, but to try to expand it out as well along the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of that arc, I was also curious about an earlier phase in that arc, because it's my understanding that the Mondavi also does a lot of work to cultivate the next generation of artists, in its support for schools and its educational outreach activities. Could you say something more about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So there's a number of places where that work happens. One of them is in our arts education department and artist engagement department. And that's where we really hit the K through 12 community. When Larry Vanderhoof imagined how the Mondavi Center would operate, he imagined it in his words as kind of a 3-legged stool. So there's the performance piece, there's the engagement with the university and university students, and then there's the engagement with K through 12. And we've really stuck with that model because it has really worked for us. We've emphasized different aspects of it more or less at different periods in our history. But getting kids in here in K through 12 for school matinees to maybe have their first experience with a performance is really important. That's kind of an exposure opportunity. The kids, in an hour are not going to get a chance to go super deep on a specific genre or a specific artist, but it will give them that taste of the excitement of live performance. And then we also have committed to actually finding young artists and trying to advance their careers. So artists that are still not even necessarily professional yet or very early in their career. So at one point for 15 years, we had a classical music young artist competition that was highly regarded. That was sunset a few years ago. That program was wonderful. It had kind of run its course for us. And several years ago, we had a high school jazz band that was in a partnership with the San Francisco Jazz Ensemble. So if you're familiar with the SF Jazz Collective, which regularly performs at the Mondavi Center, this is an octet of absolutely superstar jazz musicians. We partnered with them to mentor a high school version of that same band. We did that for 3 years. So which is all to say, sort of balancing exposure activities, just coming in for an hour or two, getting to see a performance, which is important and wonderful and the core of what we do. Also, with really deep training opportunities, where it's fewer students, fewer artists, but much more intense, has been our model for a long time, and I think it's worked really well for us.
That's great. Well, and serving other communities as well. What is Mondavi, or how has Mondavi addressed some of the major currents in performing arts today, including, for example, more calls for diversity and equity and inclusion?
So we, about 5 years ago, we adopted a new strategic plan, which a big piece of that was a deeper focus on diversity, equity, and for us, it's diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion, because accessibility is uniquely important, especially for a venue like ours. Of course, we've got a long history, a 20-year plus history of diverse programming. But I think the next phase, what we saw as the next phase for us in the starting about 5 years ago, was not just diversifying the programming, but making a real concerted effort to diversify audiences, and to find out what communities outside of Davis, communities of color, Latinx communities that we want to work with, find out what they're interested in seeing from us artistically, present that to them, and then when they come to the building, find ways to make them feel like they actually belong here. That this isn't just a venue for kind of older classical music fans, which it most definitely, that is an important part of what we do, but that is not all of what we do.
Great, great. Well, I know this 20th anniversary season will be a hit. You're going to knock it out of the park. But if you could choose a couple of favorite children, what are some of the pieces you're particularly looking forward to this season?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did during the pandemic. So if you know the Mondavi Center, which I know you do, there's Jackson Hall, which is the big concert hall. That's the 1,800 seat hall, and then there's the Vanderhoof Studio Theater, which is a very flexible space. My personal favorite room to work in, to program, is the club setup in that room. So our community will know it if they come specifically to jazz. The room is set up as a 184 seat jazz club with a bar in the room. It works like a jazz club. It has that intimacy with the artist. It has that excitement. It's just a really great space to program in. During the pandemic, when we were thinking what our first post-pandemic season was going to look like, we decided to put the club on hiatus, which from a programming perspective, and for me personally, it was the right decision, because we didn't know that we could work in a small room like that. We didn't know when we would be able to. It was an absolute heartbreaker, because that's also the space where we break new jazz artists, like we just did a couple weeks ago, like we'll do again in November. I'll mention those. And speaking of DEI work, next week we have this extraordinary theater project called Evolve, which is a theater piece made up of monologues about the challenges of policing in communities of color and the relationship between the police and communities of color. And that room is built for this kind of really edgy, exciting, interesting work. And so what I'm excited about this season is we brought that space back. We've got the club back, the two runs of jazz we've got this fall. So we had the Connie Han trio a couple weeks ago. We've got Emmett Cohen trio, massive up and coming, somebody to watch. We booked him when he was a little bit unknown, and he just was on Good Morning America. So it's exciting to bring people like that in and to introduce them to our audience in such a small room. So I'm just super excited to have the, so to speak, the club back with us this year. And then on the big side of things, one of the things we're celebrating our 20th anniversary with is the production of Swan Lake by Ballet Prelchicage, which is a dance company from Aix-en-Provence, France, with whom we've had a relationship since the Mondavi Center opened. They were part of our first season. Our 10th anniversary big event was by them. It was their incredible production of Snow White. And this is a choreographer who takes, one of the things he does really well is take classic work like Swan Lake or Snow White and kind of turn it on its head. He puts it in a different time, deals with really interesting questions around things like gender that are raised by things like dance. So we're excited in March to present Swan Lake and to present what will be our 20th anniversary gala weekend.
Excellent. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us and sharing how the Mondavi Center continues to illuminate, educate, and connect. And thank all of you out there for joining us. I'm Tim Gaffaney, and you've been watching In the Studio on Davis Media Access.
Thank you.